Welcome, everyone, to our weekly Torah learning of spreading more light and love into the world. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem will give to us. Let's give generously, so Hashem will give us generously. I'm going to put some coins in the tzedakah box. Please join me from home. I'm going to say some names for Tehillim, and we're going to say Psalm 20, which is Kapitel Chaf. So please join me. The Tzemach Tzedek said if we only knew the power of Tehillim, we would say it day and night. And we really need the hostages home. We just celebrated Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is a month of miracles, and we should see miracles with our eyes. Lam natseach mizmar leDavid yancha Adonai b'yam sarah. Yisa gevcha shem elehei akay v'yishlach ezracha mikaydesh umitzian yisadecha yizkar kol min chaysecha ve'elascha yidash nasela. Yitain lacha chelva vevcha v'chol atzascha yimalei. Neranana b'shua secha uv'shem Eloheinu nidgal yimalei Adonai kol mishalei secha. Ata yadaiti ki Ashia Adonai mishecha yanehu mishmei kachai b'gvorei seisha yiminai. Ela v'recha v'ela v'susim v'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir. Hema karu v'nafalu v'anachnu kamnu v'nisaydad. Adonai Hashia hamelach yanenu b'yan karinu. The Tzemach Tzedek said, if we only knew the power of Tehillim, we would say it day and night. So we're going to say some Tehillim. Refuah Shlema for Chana Yente Rivka Bas Shendel, Yosef ben Devor Leah, Razel Bas Adas, Rafal Chayim Meir ben Simachasha, Meir Simcha ben Rivka Dina, Shalom Dover ben Rachel Bela, Yosef Shlomo ben Risha, Devor Leah Bas Yafa Liba, Mercedes ben Esther, Esther Bela Bas Yehudas Chana, Gershon Leib ben Menucha. And we're also going to say Tehillim for a very special friend, Sephora Bas Yocheved Zissel, and everyone that needs. We're including you in this Tehillim, and you should all merit to have that. I do these classes weekly in memory of my dear grandmother, Rivka Dina Bas Yosef Yehuda, Chaim Dov ben Betzalel. He was known as Chaim Ber Wilshansky. To save a life is saving a world, and he saved many in the Soviet Union. And Bela Bas Betzalel, my grandmother who passed away this year. We're also dedicating this class in memory of a very special person from our class's sibling and sister-in-law, Sonia Zahara Bas David, who perished in a terrible fire this year. And we're dedicating this class this week in memory of my dear great aunt who passed away on Sunday. Her name was Chava Bas Shlomo Zev, also known as Chava Wolshansky. She was my great aunt. And so a little bit about her real fast. Every Sunday for years, she would feed the elderly, and she would go to Kingsbrook Hospital on Shabbat and sit and actually feed them and visit them and bring them joy. So tonight we're going to bring her joy and elevate her neshama. And I'm sure she is in the highest place. She passed away on Shabbos on Friday night, and that was her birthday as well. So she was born and passed away on the same day. And that usually only happens for very righteous people. So may her neshama have the highest aliyah. Okay, so let me tell you about tonight's class and how it all began. So a couple of years ago, right after COVID, me and my husband really needed to get out of New York. No one was really taking in guests for Shabbat, or family didn't want anyone in their homes. So we're like, we're out. So where did we go? We went to Cancun, Mexico, to our friends Shluchim in Mexico, the Drucks. They're unbelievable. And we stayed in a hotel and we joined them for the meals and the seders. And by the second seder, it was just magnificent. I was sitting with my husband and I noticed a couple sitting by themselves. At the end of, I read it like I could visualize where they were sitting. Like the room was pretty big, but the first seder everyone comes to, all the Jews celebrate. The second one, not so much. It's like not really a thing. Like only the people that are really observe Pesach, like, or observes this mitzvah, they come to. So it was the room was half full from the night before. So we were able to notice who was there. And I see this really cute couple. And I turned to my husband. I'm like, I'm going to invite them to come sit with us. So it's a little bit out of my comfort zone because most people don't know this, but I am a little shy. And I went over to them. I'm like, hi, I'm Chaya. You want to join us? And they looked at me and why not? It was a long night. So they said, sure. And they got up and they joined our table and we started talking. And if you know my husband Izzy, right away he was able to make some kind of connections. And we got to meet Cathy and Ezra, and we be instant friends. And we were like, doing like geography. Where are you from? Where are you from? Chicago. Cool. Who do you know? Who do I know? And then somehow she mentioned her rabbi that she knew, someone that was very close to her that married her. And she said his name was Rabbi Schusterman. And I was like, oh, Schusterman. My uncle is Rabbi Schusterman, Yossi Schusterman and Sarah Schusterman from California, like Rabbi and Rav. So she's like, I think that's his son. And that connected us, and we just had a beautiful, beautiful time the next day. We were talking. I guess I was complaining to her about the mask situation, that I didn't like it. And she goes, I have the best mask for you. And she bought me the coolest white bezeled mask with like rhinestones all over it. But it was like the secret mask that you could actually breathe. So I wore it wherever I went, and it was awesome. So yeah, I was really, really, really excited about that mask. And I was more excited that she gifted me something so special, and we just met and we became friends and we kept in touch. A few years ago, when I started this class, Cathy spoke. And unfortunately, we don't have the recording. And I've been asking her for many years if she can please consider sharing her story again about her special dad, who was a Holocaust survivor. And we're going to start off by saying his name. So, Cathy, could you tell me his full name and his dad's name so we can honor him tonight, his neshama, because his yahrzeit was just Rosh Chodesh Nisan.
Right. It's his name was Chaim ben Tzvi Halevi. He was a
Okay.
Levite.
So Chaim ben Tzvi Halevi, his neshama should have the highest aliyah, and we should see him so soon with the coming of Mashiach.
Amen.
And he was a very righteous person, and I actually messaged you today. The Rebbe always said that Holocaust survivors have the power to bless, and I fully believe that life happens after death. They're still living in a different form, and he should bless you and your family with everything that you need and want in a revealed way. And he should bless everyone on this class, and we should see him so soon with the coming of Mashiach. A little later today, I'm going to put in the chat box, which Cathy will explain, but he was interviewed by the Spielberg. Can you just tell us for a moment how he was interviewed?
The Steven Spielberg Foundation.
And I listened to 2 hours of his testimony. It's off the charts amazing to hear what he has to say. And he was a really incredible, righteous, special man. And I'm excited to share it with you. And for those of you that are listening into the recording, on the description of this chat on YouTube, I will be putting all the 4 recordings so you can hear her incredible dad, who you'll tell us what he was, no, what his name was, who people called him. And I'm excited to hear tonight's topic is deals by God and
Deals with God.
deals with God. My apologies. And we're going to hear about your incredible father and about you. And I am so honored and humbled that I got to meet you on Pesach. It was about, I think, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and at the Seder, and we're coming close to Pesach, so this is a very appropriate time to share this story with you. Welcome, Cathy. We're honored to have you with us
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you. I will share my screen. And okay. So I am going to tell you about how my dad came to start making deals with God. So this past weekend on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it was my father's, a blessed memory. It was his 20th yahrzeit. So there are times when it seems like it was just yesterday, and other times that it's so long ago. So this is my father. He was known as, of course, his Hebrew name is Chaim ben Tzvi, but he also had other names as well. He was born Zoltan Otto Lefkowitz. His mother didn't like the name that I guess the father had wanted on the birth certificate. So although he was named Zoltan Otto, his mother, Reggie, decided that he was always Otto. So he went by the name Otto. and he was born November 26th in 1924, and it was his 100th birthday this past November. So this is his family, that the younger part. There were a total of 13 siblings. My father is the tallest one in the middle here in the back. It's interesting that the older boys, they also were in the concentration camp with my father. My grandfather, he actually had two wives. His first wife, her name was Hannah, and she died in childbirth with his eighth child. So, as a religious man, when his wife passed, they had to find a shidduch, and they ended up finding my grandma, Reggie. And of course, I don't know how easy it is to find somebody that wants to take on somebody who has eight children right from the get-go, especially back in the day. But um, she was an amazing woman, and she did it. So he had eight children from his first marriage, and then an additional five. He had four boys and a girl with my grandmother, Reggie. And all of them perished in the Holocaust except the three older brothers. There is not a photo of my father's youngest sister. Her name was Gabriella. I'm actually named after her. My middle name is, I'm Catherine Gabriella, and I'll get to why my name is what my name is anyway, but my Hebrew name is Rivka Rachel. And my grandma, Reggie, her Hebrew name was Rivka, and my aunt, Gabriella, it was Rachel. So my name is Rivka Rachel in their memory. So this was my father when he was 18 years old. So it happened to be that when he was 18, he had been studying in Budapest, and because of numerus clausus, which was a limitation in how many Jews were allowed to study, he had to leave and go back home. He was from a very small town called Nirmada. I actually went to visit there with my family a couple years ago, and their home is actually still, there. The government took it over, and it's now a retirement center. Just a side note. Anyway, my father was young and strong, as you can see, 18 years old, in the prime of his life, when he was asked to leave the university, and they went back home. And there were all sorts of rumors and things going on, and they had town criers that would come, and I don't know, my father would often say they looked like crazy people. And the things in their eyes and the things that would come out of their mouths, and they were speaking craziness, that the Germans were herding up the Jews, and they were taking them by train, and they were trying to mass murder them. And my father remembers listening to this and thinking, these people are nuts. Like, that would never happen. How could that happen? That's ridiculous. So they were always hearing this, but it was something that didn't seem realistic, like so inhumane. How could something like that happen? So I had talked about that my father's two older brothers that were in the back row, the three of them. This is a photo of the three of them, obviously after the war. One was shortly after the war, and one was obviously long after the war. What had happened is when they got onto the train, they were herded into cattle cars. And my father, he talks about this in detail on his video, and I, of course, can't do it justice, but just to basically paraphrase what he was saying is that on this cattle car, he wasn't sure exactly how long it was. There was not really light, and there was no water. There was no food. There was no bathroom. He saw everything from life to death. And prior to them going onto the cattle car, they were told that they needed to only take what they could carry with them. And my grandma took the things that were the most important to her. She took her Shabbos candlesticks, and they had been told the night before that they needed to shave and get rid of all of their hair. So my grandma had braided my Aunt Gabriella's hair, and she entwined a red ribbon in it. So that was something to ward off the evil eye, Kanai that everything was like against the evil eye. My father was very big into superstition. It was passed on to me. I wear red ribbons and do all sorts of things. But she braided her hair with a red ribbon. And by the way, his family, being Hungarian, they were all blue-eyed and they had, blonde hair. So definitely not, didn't look really like me with the dark hair and the dark eyes, but they looked very much like all the other Hungarians. And that was something that my father said, that they very much, everybody was very, very warm and friendly. The whole town, everybody welcomed one another. Everybody knew they were Jewish, but it was not a big deal because it was just who they were. They were Hungarian and they were Jewish, and other people were also Hungarian, and they had that camaraderie, which is why it was also shocking that something like this could happen. So anyway, like I had said, prior to getting onto the train, my grandmother took the two things that were most important to her, her Shabbos candlesticks and the braids that she had cut off from Gabriella's hair. On the train ride, when they were going, at the time, of course, they didn't know where they were going. It ended up being they were going to Auschwitz. They saw just about everything imaginable. And of course, people were crying and scared. And my father said that he saw his parents age literally before his eyes, that it was just very, very stressful. He saw his Sunday school teacher die on a heart attack, whatever, on the train. He also saw somebody give birth. So, saw it all. Once they arrived in Auschwitz, they were basically kicked off of the train onto the platform, which was, I don't want to, misquote and say the wrong thing, but something like 18 to 20 feet off the ground. It was not like an easy jump, especially for anybody elderly or somebody young. Once they got off of the train, and mind you, they were still kind of in a little bit of shock, and like no one quite understood. And now it's kind of like replaying in their mind, the things we heard. Is that true? Like, is there some, reality in what was being said? So when they got off of the train, there was a man there. I wouldn't even call him a gentleman, a man, if you could even say that. Later, it became known that his name was Dr. Joseph Mengele. So when they got there, this person was shooing them from left to right. At the time, no one knew what the two lines were. It just so happened that it was later found out that one side was life and one side was death. But at the time, all my father knew was that his parents were in one line and he was in another. And he did not want to be in a different line. He wanted to be there to protect his parents, to protect his little brother and his little sister. His brothers, the three that are there, were all teenagers. My father was 18. The brother on the other end, he was 17, and the brother in the middle was 16. So the three of them were the strong ones. The other one, his next youngest brother, was going to be a bar mitzvah, so he was just 12. And his little sister, Gabriella, she was 9. And his parents, I'm not quite sure how old they were exactly, but my father wanted to take care of them. So he jumped his line to be with them. And then this man, Dr. Joseph Mengele, that he later found out, he had a cane in his hand that had a like crooked end. like a typical, like a rounded edge. He took that end and he grabbed it and he put it around my father's neck and he pulled him back to go from the line that he was with his mother to put it in the other line. Yes. So they pulled him out of line with the cane. And my father was very, very, angry and upset, and he just wanted to go over there. So he jumped the line again. This time he was beaten, and then he was then put back in the other line. A third time, my father jumped and he went over there because, once again, really wanted to be with his parents and to see what was going on. And he was beaten, and he was beaten brutally. When he looked up after he was beaten, his parents and little sister and brother were gone. He didn't know where they were in the line. The only thing that he did know is that there was a very odd stench in the whole place that all of a sudden came to him. He said that he never in his life had smelled anything like that and hopes to never smell anything like it again. Once again, at the time, he didn't know what that was, but it was later found out that that was the crematorium and that the bodies were being burned. My father at this point in time didn't know where his parents were. He just knew that he was going through a line. It was called a delousing line, where they were basically sprayed with chemicals. They were told to prevent uh, lice and infestations and things like that. But from that day forward, my father was always, hoping to be able to see where his parents were. He remembers asking people, do you know where they could be? Do you know what's going on? And somebody had pointed to one of the chimneys, and they're like, there. My father's like, what? And he said, yeah, they like the smoke, that's them. So I think that people always go through a process in their minds of wondering, could it really be? Is this a reality? Just like when you face any kind of a tragedy, you kind of question it and are, wondering and always having hope, maybe they were the lucky ones. Maybe they were able to make it out. Maybe they were not, so unlucky. But it was just one of those things that was, a constant hope and a constant whatever. So anyway, the three brothers remained together, and my father and his two brothers made a pact. So my father's name was Otto. His next brother was Yuri, which is George, basically, and the youngest one was Pishta, which is now we call him Steve in English. They decided that they would always be the three of them in line, with with the youngest brother always being in the middle. So no matter where the Nazis would cut the line, the youngest brother was always with another brother. So they felt that that was their way to protect him. So if they cut the line after my father, then the youngest brother was with the middle brother. If they cut it, afterward, either way, the middle brother was always watched over. So they were very, very close, and they made sure, that was something that they did for their parents, to make sure that they were taken care of. Their job while they were in the camp, they were then sent to a work camp, Birkenau. Auschwitz is just a death camp. There really isn't much work there that goes on. So they all have to be transferred to do a job, because this was cheap labor, uh, basically, so they could get them to do whatever they needed them to do. Their job was to create fake airplanes for the Allies to bomb. So they would basically create these, dummy planes and set them up from the air. They looked just like real airplanes. And then the Allies would bomb these thinking that they destroyed the aircraft. But the real interesting thing that I think is that my dad vividly remembers how they would parade them through the streets for the sole purpose of humiliation and just putting them on show. Like, look what we did for the Jews. So they would often just go into the middle of town, and my dad had told the story once where they went to the town and they had to pick up the cobblestones from the street. And after they picked them up, they put them back. So basically, it was just wasting of their energy and humiliating them. But what my father says more than anything is that when people say they didn't know, that's not true. The majority of them knew they were being paraded. How can you not know when you see these people that have their heads shaved? They're wearing mismatched shoes, clothing that doesn't fit. They look like starved prisoners, basically skeletons that were walking around. So, he always said that, people would ask him, later on, do you hate Germans? Do you dislike Germans? And the one thing about my father is that he was never tactful. That was not something he ever learned. He kind of always spoke from the heart, good or bad. He would tell you exactly what he thought. And he would say, no, I only dislike the ones that have gray hair like me, because those are the ones that knew it was happening. He said, I can't blame a child or a grandchild for the sins that, their ancestors did. But the ones that saw it and allowed it to happen, those are the ones that I, really worry about. It was at times like this that my father first began to question God. And he would say, how can this happen? How could God allow such a thing to happen? And my father said that, an older person, they have uh, different sins that they've created. But how exactly could his 12-year-old little brother or his 9-year-old little sister, what sin could they have done? What was the reason behind their punishment? So my father began to really question God and to really wonder, how could God allow such a thing to happen? And I will get back to the screen. And this is a picture of my father. In the bottom portion of the screen, you'll see that there's a face that's circled. That is my father. Also in that very same photo, by the middle bar, closest to the man standing, Elie Wiesel is in that photo as well. So this is a picture that my father later on went back to. This is from Yad Vashem. This photo is in Yad Vashem, and this is something that he doesn't even really remember the photo being taken. He remembers that the Red Cross came into the camp and that the Red Cross was taking photos. But, they were all in kind of such a daze of everything that was going on and so malnourished that, doesn't remember this. We later did talk to Elie Wiesel, and I have something to show from that later. But after my father was in the work camps for about a year, so he went on Shavuot in 1944, and they were liberated. My father calls it Liberation Day. They were liberated on February 11th in 1945. My father later named a horse that was born on the same day, also Liberation Day. So my grandfather was a horse trader by profession. And so my father, when he came to America, he ended up having a horse farm. And so in memory, that's not his profession. But he wanted to have a horse farm in memory of his parents. So anyway, I will pause this for a moment. So after, actually, I thought here, stop the share. There we go. So after Liberation Day, the three brothers went back to Nirmata. They were hoping that they were going to be able to, see what family members survived, have, meet with whomever would come back. And nobody, they were there, they stayed there for a while. They went to their home. It had been completely looted. There's obviously lots of stories that are going on in between, and you can definitely hear everything that my father has to say. I'm just going through different highlights of different things. But one of the things is when they went to the home and everything was looted, the one thing that my father saw that was gone was their cow. And that was very important because they were able to get fresh milk. So it turned out that one of the neighbors took the cow. So my father went to court, a Hungarian court, and he wanted his family's cow back. And when he went to the court, the judge ruled in favor of the neighbor because the neighbor had children and she needed the cow for her children. My father said that this was one of the lowest points because now his family was murdered, and there was absolutely no justice in Hungary, no feeling of, sorrow and regret and wanting to make any sort of restitution. So my father had decided that he wanted to go to America, the land of the free, where, there's so much prosperity, anybody can make things happen. So in 1949, my father was finally able to come to America. And on his way to America, they were given, everybody who was on the boat, they were given $5. So the $5 was to start anew. I mean, it's funny when you think about it. I don't know what $5 could buy. It sure couldn't buy much then. But my father ended up saving a quarter from that, which I will show you in a moment. So he did that, and he came to New York. He was at Ellis Island, and he had some distant relatives, cousins that were living in New York, and he went and he stayed with them. And HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, gave him a job. And his job at the time was to work in a pepper factory. My father went the first day and he absolutely hated it. He was sneezing and it was just horrible. And so he went and he complained and he said, I don't want to work in a pepper factory. And his relatives were appalled and they said, you can't complain. They're giving you a job. Like you have to take the job. And my dad said, of course I can complain. I don't want that job. That's not something that I want. So they ended up giving him another job. And the job was to become a baker. And he worked as a baker at a place called Junior's. It was in the Catskills. And my father enjoyed this job. And years after, whenever we would be snowed in, my father would bake because there was nothing else to do. So he would bake bread and he would be like, I need 10 kilos of flour. And my mom was like, 10 kilos? Like, we don't have that much flour. But it was cute because that's how he knew his recipes. It was like to make, hundreds of, loaves of bread or different things. But anyway, he worked there and he enjoyed it so much. And then he was sent to work at Junior's in Florida. While he was in Florida, he this still, very new to America, didn't speak the language. My father was drafted into the U.S. Army. So it was kind of funny. I didn't know that when you're not a citizen that you can still be drafted. And so he was, and he didn't speak English. He was sent to Germany, and I actually have a photo that I will share with you. And he is a military policeman. So that is him in his military police uniform, working in, of all places, Germany, working for the American government as a translator. So I don't really know how that can work when you don't know English very well and how you can help translate, but for whatever reason, it worked, and that is what he did. He had a captain there that he thought was just incredible, like a really, really, like a mensch, like such a good person. And his name was Captain, and his last name was Leroy. And my dad's like, Leroy, I like that name. What does it mean? What's, the origin? And the man said, it means in French, the king. And my dad said, I really like that. So interestingly enough, my father, when he came back to America after he was honorably discharged from the Army, he changed his name. So my father officially went from Otto Lefkowitz to changing his name to Robert Otto Leroy, choosing the name Leroy. He liked that because he liked that it could mean the king, and he felt like he would be a king in America. And then he also thought that his name would not be a dead giveaway that he's Jewish. He still had, like I said, some issues in trust and in questioning Hashem and all those actions. And he figured, this way, if I want someone to know I'm Jewish, I'll let them know. If not, I'm Robert Leroy, and that will work. So when my father came back, he actually went back to Miami, and he was still the baker. He met a girl. They fell in love. Her name was Ava, and they went back to Chicago. She was a nice Jewish girl, a nice Jewish family. They went back to Chicago, and my father met the family, and they would not allow them to get married. They did not want their daughter to be married to an immigrant. So my father then said, in his mind, how crazy is this? I get basically discriminated against by the Nazis. Then it is the Hungarian government, and now fellow Jews. So this was the complete disconnect from Judaism, thinking, here are my own people. And there are plenty of stories of Jews that sold other Jews out during the Holocaust. And so this was just kind of like a very sore point. Like, how could someone do this, let alone to another human? But how could a Jew do something like this to another Jew? So my father then, really had this whole thing that questioning God, always, always questioning, how is this happening? And then he later found out about how they actually, in the camp, that it was done through showers and Zyklon B. And my father said that every day of his life, there wasn't a time when he could enter a shower without feeling the anxiety and questioning what his mother and little sister would have felt. Where were they? Were they on the top? Were they on the bottom? Were they gasping for air? Where was what were their last thoughts? What did they see? And then that's what the shower head did to him. And it just made him, have so much anger and hostility towards God. This is a photo of the quarter that I was talking to you about. And my father had saved this, and it's a mezuzah that's on the chain with it. And he had said that he wanted to keep it, and he wanted to always have him remember his humble beginnings. So it was something that was important to him to know where he came from and to keep him grounded. And as you can see, it's next to a mezuzah. So although he was, having, maybe like, I don't know, like a disagreement with God, kind of questioning, God's motives, he still was trying to work out that relationship and figured that God must have a plan. He didn't know exactly what that plan was, but he ended up staying in Chicago, doing some sales jobs, and eventually he became a self-made man, and he worked in construction. And it was then that my father realized that he was spared for his seed. He figured that Hashem had a reason for him to stay alive, and that it was definitely his children. So here is a photo of my parents and my two brothers. So with the birth of each child and then subsequently grandchildren, my father slowly began to forgive God. He was, softening up a bit and having more appreciation. Interestingly enough, he decided that he wanted his children to have American names. So you're probably wondering, when you first heard my name, Cathy, that's always the thing when we go to Chabad, like, Cathy, your name is Cathy. And so my brother, the dark-haired brother, is Michael. The blonde-haired brother was Stephen. They were both my uncle who passed away, the little brother, the one that was sitting in the chair in the first picture, he was Miklos, which is like Mickey. My brother Steve was for a relative Pishta, another Pishta, and I'm Catherine. There was no Catherine that I'm named after, but basically they're very, American sounding names. We also were each given Hebrew names, and my father said that our Hebrew name is for us to tell whomever we want, but if we want people to know that we're Jewish, that's on us. And if we don't want people to know we're Jewish, that's also on us. So it was more of a fear, and anxiety, not wanting to ever have what happened to him and his family ever happen again and happen to his children. So, but my father also knew that education was super important. And he had, once again, these fears of anti-Semitism coming and that there would be another Holocaust. I had mentioned to you before that Elie Wiesel was in that photo, and that my father and Elie had some contact post-war. Elie Wiesel wrote Night is one of the most famous of his books. When he came to visit us, I was probably 7 or 8 at the time, and he wrote this book. I, of course, didn't appreciate it as much as I appreciate it now. But so he wrote for Cathy, so she learns to tell tales. And it was important to both my father and to Elie Wiesel that we learn to always speak about what happened and that we never forget about what happened. And I mean, you can see by what's going on in the world today that it's becoming more and more forgotten. And that's really horrific. And one of the things that happened that really, really brought my father to a realization was there was a professor at Northwestern University. His name was Professor Arthur Butts. He wrote a book, and the book was called Hoax of the 20th Century. This book basically said that the Holocaust never happened, and that if anyone can prove that it happened, he would give them $1 million. So this is something that was shocking to my father, that it wasn't, we're not talking 50 years after the Holocaust, 100 years after the Holocaust. We're talking less than 30 years after the Holocaust that someone has the audacity to say it didn't even happen. So it became a reality, and that my father knew that education needed to take place. So my father created a company with my mother, a not-for-profit organization called Witnesses to the Holocaust, where they wanted to focus on education, and in particular for the Holocaust. And he wanted to make sure that people would never forget. So this was the very first bargain deal with God that I'm aware of that my father made. He very well could have made some before, but this was the first one. And he wanted to educate our future, and he wanted people to do this in the memory of his beloved family. So he created this, and he became a very avid proponent of Holocaust education, and he worked on getting it mandated in the state of Illinois. So we now, thanks to my father, learn about the Holocaust during middle school. It is something that is mandated in our education. So it was very, very important that he did that. And that was the first deal that he made with God, is to allow him, please, to be able to create this and have it be something where he can spread the word and that he can inform as many people as possible. My father would go around to schools and he would speak and he would tell his story. And my father said that this was very difficult for him because every time he did it, he was reliving the whole story all over again. And that became a difficult and emotional thing for him to deal with. This pin says Lizkor. He actually got this at Yad Vashem when he went to the World Holocaust, the very first World Holocaust gathering. It was in the late 70s, and he went and he got this, and he wore this pin and others. He bought a bunch of them, and he wore it so that people would question him and be, what is on your collar? What are you wearing? And my father would, always tell people, I'm a Holocaust survivor. This says, to remember this. I want people to learn. I want people to know. I want people to never forget. So it became something that was very, very important to him. I actually also wear a Zahor pin from my father's passing. From that day on, I took on that task, and I always wear it. I mean, no matter where I go, I can be wearing, a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a dressy outfit, whatever. It's always on, and I make sure that I honor him in that way, and I keep a piece of him always alive in the memory of his family, always alive. So, but that was the beginning of the bargains. And from that point on, my father would always make additional bargains with God. Typically, the bargains always had to do with his children, grandchildren, or Israel. In this photo, It's my father. You can recognize that photo. Um, it's my father with my youngest one, and he is in the top photo. And then underneath it, it's when he was a baby on the right-hand side. And then on the left, it's with he and his little sister at the time. So that was always very important to my father, Holocaust education. It got to the point where I don't know, I would say, I don't want to say that I was, traumatized by it, but it was very scary when my father came out and he started doing all of these public speeches and talking to the newspapers and doing TV interviews, that we started getting a lot of hate mail. And I was shocked. I was a little girl at the time. I was literally like I said, 7, 8, 9. But we would get things in the mail that were on another level. Like we're talking like very fancy printed items, coloring books, color Jews dead, comic books, get rid of the Jews, and death threats. It was so scary, and I was terrified of losing my parents. I ended up having this, I was so afraid. I spent half of my life worrying about what would happen if I lost my parents. Like I can't even imagine the things that my father endured. And when I turned 18, I was a madracha in Israel, and like I couldn't even fathom dealing with the things that he had to deal with in his lifetime. I mean, I still can't, and I'm getting to be an old lady now, but it's kind of crazy. In this photo, it's a picture of my father with all three of my children. My father, this was his last trip to Israel. It was for my oldest son's bar mitzvah. And this was the last picture that he has. You can see there's pictures of him over the years in front of this photo. But this was the last one, but at least it has all three of my children in it, which is very nice. My children, by the way, do not have American names. My children have Israeli names. So our oldest, my husband is Israeli. Our oldest is Daniel Moshe, although I guess it can kind of be Americanized. My daughter is Tali, and the youngest one is Kobe. So those are, it's a nice memory that they got to do that, and that my father was so, I know a lot of survivors don't really speak about what happened to them. It was very, very emotional. And like I said, I know that from my father, every time he would speak, he would relive it. And it became hard for him because it, raised his blood pressure, do all sorts of things. But he really thought that it was so incredibly important. So the next deal that my father made that was a big one was when there was an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. My father was so upset about what was going on in Israel, and how ironic that it's it's an ongoing issue. But my father made a deal with God, and he said, he was in construction, and he had told God that if he got this contract, it was a contract with the city of Chicago, that if he got this contract, he would donate. My father was always, I'm going to do 20% of whatever I get, and I'm going to donate it to, whatever it should be. But he had said for this deal, he had said, if I get this contract, I am going to donate, Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to donate an ambulance. And it's going to be, one of those high level ambulances. And, thank God that he got the contract, and he got the ambulance. So back in the day, it talks about Magen David Adom, and he got it for $70,000. And this was, there's a Chabad rabbi a very close friend of our family that was there at the dedication, Rabbi Moshe Reitman. That's who's in that photo as well. But so my dad was now a very, very good businessman, and he became even a businessman with God in all of his dealings. Because of this, he became known throughout the rabbis and throughout Chabad and all of the Israeli rabbis as a man of his word. So if Robert Leroy says that he is going to, donate something, he is good and he will follow it through. So the rabbis found that my father's Achilles heel was his children and grandchildren. So the rabbis would often, come to him and say, for a blessing, for this or that. And they would come in person because this is a time that, there were no emails, no texts. They would come in person, and we lived pretty much in the middle of nowhere at the time. He bought 80 acres. He has an 80-acre horse ranch. And, we would see rabbis in, the black hats, long coats, walking up this really long driveway. And I remember saying to my mom, there's a rabbi, here. And my mom's like, oh, he's here to see your father. And I said, well, how do you know he's not here to see you? And she said, believe me, they're coming to see your father because they know that he can't say no. And that's basically the way it came to be. He would end up, donating and, doing all these things. And then my father started doing deals regarding horses. So if his horse, he did race horses, and if his horse would win, place, or show, which means first, second, or third, he would donate 20% to whatever rabbi blessed him for that horse race. So it was really cute. Here's a picture. I'm with my father and my mother. I'm in the middle. That's one of the horses at a horse race. But my father was, he would do tzedakah. Whoever gave him the blessing for the winning horse, they're the one that got the money. My father really wanted to create an Orthodox synagogue on the property, on his 80-acre horse ranch. So the reason behind that is because my husband, Ezra, is Israeli, and he, although is not necessarily, as Orthodox by, American standards, but very, very observant, would never, at least at the time, now he's become much more observant, but he would not drive to go to, our synagogue was 5 or 6 miles away. So my husband would walk, and my dad said, I don't want him to have to walk that far to go to shul, especially in, bad weather. I want to build one on the property. So he wanted it to be a Chabad, and he went to, Chabad in Illinois, all the people that may be, and say, I want this. And they said, we can't. We can't do it. There just aren't enough Jews in the area to support it. So we ended up doing a little conservative congregation called Shirat Shalom, and we did that. And after my father passed, like I said, my father passed 20 years ago, and then after he died, we ended up having a Chabad on our property. So it will be 13 years. It will be the bar mitzvah year this year of our Chabad. It's Chabad of Elgin. I like to call it Little Chabad on the Prairie, because it's very much it's all woodsy and farm, and it's actually very, very beautiful. My father, as I said, he passed away on Rosh Chodesh Nisan 20 years ago. And then the rabbi stated that even in death, my father had to do something in a grand way. because Rosh Chodesh Nisan is a very, very, auspicious day, and that of all the days to choose, like that's the day that, Hashem would make sure that that's when my dad would leave. Um, like I said before, I wear a Zahor pin in his memory because he died on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Our sitting Shiva was shortened because of Pesach. It had to end early. The whole holiday, with so it was so sad. Um, as you know, I Passover was just so much fun, and it was like a really a great family time. But I had such tremendous sadness, like I just couldn't get over it, and um, like everything about it, like I still loved being with my kids. I still loved, the holiday itself, but it was just such a very, very sad time. And then 4 years after my dad passed, because like I said, this was like something that was like, it was just heavy on my heart every Passover. 4 years after my father passed, a horse was born. And this horse was a horse like no other. Oh, sorry. That is the property that my father, it's an overview of what the farm looked like. At the very top of the screen, I don't know if you can see it. Um, it's Rabbi Schusterman Way. Rabbi Schusterman was the rabbi who married my husband and myself. Those are the horses. That's the farm. My father would fly the American flag and the Israeli flag. So it's very cute. He had, swans, horses. It's just a beautiful, remarkable property. But anyway, this horse was born, and the horse was born right before Passover. So we named him Dayenu, and it should have been enough, and this horse was everything. I knew that he was like a gift from God and from my father, like without a doubt. If you can see, this horse has a white heart on his head. That's very rare. There are horses that have a mark. They call it a star, but nothing like this is a legitimate heart. Like it was, and he had a piece of my heart. He was like a puppy dog. He would see me and he would, run to me, nuzzle me. Like he was so beyond and so special. Here's another picture of Dayenu. The first picture was when Dayenu was born. It was just a couple days after his birth. This is when Dayenu was a couple years old. Absolutely beautiful, incredible horse. But like I said, this horse filled my heart like no other. And I could actually, I looked forward to Passover. It was celebrating, another year of Dayenu. So it was no longer a depressing time. It was symbolizing, happiness and something exciting. Tragically, Dayenu died on the 1st of Iyar, 18 years after my father passed. So high, once again, numbers are always coming in, but it was like almost like symbolic, 18 years after his passing, high, it was done. It was, life goes on, life continues. And Haya has a story to say about that too. But it is in, the memory of my father that I too, that's me with Dayenu, my horse puppy, um, that I also have become a deal maker with God. I don't think I'm anywhere near as, artful or skillful at it as my father was, but it's something that I definitely work on. And there is a recording, as I was saying earlier, there's a recording that my father had done through the Steven Spielberg Foundation. Steven Spielberg created this foundation where he wanted to document all of the living Holocaust survivors that he could. So he sent out crews to all of the homes of Holocaust survivors to document and to get it in their words, so that it wouldn't be lost or forgotten. Because as wonderful as it is to be able to hear me tell my father's, tales, like Elie Wiesel had said, it's not the same as hearing it first person. Am I missing something? Am I forgetting something? Am I adding a little bit extra spice? I always wonder, will people question what it is? But if you hear it straight from that person, then you know that that is what it is. So I would like to play, it's just 2 minutes of something. This is the very, very end. There are 4 tapes. Haya will give the link to it should you want to listen to it. It is definitely very, very interesting to hear all the things that have taken place and that my father had to endure. But this last bit, I think my father becomes very emotional, and I just think it's just something that I would like for you to hear. Can I do it now, Haya? Okay.
I think Yom HaShoah should be engraved in the mind of every human being in the world, because there is a one day that we all must remember the horrendous horrors that were committed against our people. And if the world does not remember it, the world is doomed to fail. The world is doomed to repeat it, and it cannot be permitted to happen. I'm sorry, I get so emotional at this moment, but yes, there is a day that must be engraved in people's mind forever, because we talk about how we were liberated from Egypt 6,000 years ago. So what? To me, it's a story, like my daughter says. I was liberated from Auschwitz, that is not a story, that's a reality. How my people were burned and their bodies desecrated in Auschwitz. That is not a story, that's a reality. How can you not remember it? The only way you cannot remember it if you don't listen to my words or listen to the words of the other survivors. Why? You have to ask yourself the question, did that happen? Because the world did not listen. The world did not learn. The world must learn. And must remember.
How do you feel your grandson? Can you say something to him, or what do you think?
What do you think, Dan?
Talk a little
There
bit.
were a lot of people that were in the Holocaust. They were they were fighting in the Holocaust, but the bad guys almost won and put them in jail. But Grandpa still barred because he was a good worker.
Yes, I was a good worker. Yes.
And they let him go. They let him go. They let him go.
They let me go because I was a good worker. But you see, at the age of 6, it's very difficult to comprehend. As a matter of fact, this is what I say to you and I say to everybody. How can we talk about destroying 6 million people? What makes me qualified to talk about this to anybody? What makes anybody qualified to talk about the destruction of 6 million people? But let's talk about the destruction of my family. When I talk to you on one-on-one, I want you to be me. I want you to experience my pain. I want you to feel what I feel. I want you to understand where I came from. I want you to understand how they destroyed mine, your family. And why did they destroy your family? The only answer to that question is a simple one. They were Jews. And because they were Jews, they were destroyed. But they were destroyed so brutally, so inhumanely, so horrifyingly, that is must be embedded indelibly in the mind of every future generation that ever gonna live, that what they have done to my people. And maybe from that lesson, the world becomes a better place, because the world will learn that you cannot destroy everybody, and that there was no reason to portray my people as vermin, as rats, We are just like any other people. Many good Jews, many bad Jews, many good people. But certainly none of us have ever deserved the fate that was awaited us. But thank God for us, thank God for the survivors, thank God for our children, and thank God for our children's children. Don't worry, when my grandson is going to be 16 years old, he will have a total and complete opinion about what happened to his forefathers and why.
Thank you. How many do we have about? I think that's
Wraps it up.
wraps it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was just the small ending of what my father had said, but I also, we have to understand that my father was, learned English as a second language, yet he was a very, very articulate speaker, like very, very powerful, incredible. And one last thing that I want to say is that in his last moments, he had said that when his grandson is 16, he will know differently. My father died the night before my son turned 16. So it was just very like interesting, like that almost like my father was being prolific and like, saying something, but you can see that, he believed in Holocaust education, even for the youngest of children, that, talk about it in words that they could understand, not to give him nightmares, but that, Grandpa was a worker, he was forced to do things as opposed to imprisoned, but Holocaust education is incredibly important. And like I said, that was, the first deal that my father had made with God. And, I intend to keep doing it as well. And thank you, Haya, for allowing me to do this in my father's memory. And does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to ask?
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask a question that was asked, and then I'm gonna say the story, then we'll do a roll call, and then if any more questions come in, we will address it. So firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for that incredible, amazing story and how you brought it out. And your father was interviewed, and he was so proud of you. And on the interview, he said that his daughter is the best teacher, and you are the most incredible sharer and teacher and person. And you definitely could continue making deals with God. In fact, we know that you already started making deals behind the scenes with God. We spoke about it. And your dad is literally showing you from upstairs that he's here in so many ways. He got his Chabad house that he wanted on your property, which is so exciting. And he's showing you, he sent you Dayenu to send you so much love for your family. It even had a heart. Like you said, it was very rare. It's not something that you can find, which I asked you before, if it's a common horse. And okay, so one of the questions that came in, and I actually had this question as well, did he end up marrying that girl, Ava?
No,
No.
he did not marry Ava. The family would not allow it. They forbid it. So, I mean, if anything, I guess that's a good thing because then he was able to meet my mother, and just a very cute story of how they met. My father was they were in an office building, and my father held the elevator door open for my mother. And my mother said, "Thank you." And my father said, "You're welcome," because he had like this very thick accent. And my mother said, for the moment he said that, like she fell in love with him, knew he was, the one. So yeah, but he did not marry Ava.
That is such a cute, beautiful story. And I guess her loss, but your mom's gain and your
For
gain
sure.
for sure. Okay, so when you told me that your horse passed away, like I said, we became very good friends after we met in Cancun, Mexico, and we're still in touch a few years later, and we still have this beautiful bond, which is so special with both you and your husband Ezra and my husband. And basically, my dad shared over dinner table, like I was in his house when he was eating dinner, and he shared a story out of the blue, a Baal Shem Tov story, and it was very out of um character for him to share a story during the week like this, but he shared the story that I really, really liked, and I actually recorded it so I can remember it. And a few days later or the next day, I see that your horse passed away. And I said, hold on a minute. I think that I need to share this with Cathy. And I sent you a message, which I listened to the voice note again because you send me the voice notes. And I said, I hope this is going to bring you some comfort. And then you said that it did, which I'm happy that it did because, you know, a story is a story, but like you have to be sensitive when someone passes away. And I wanted it to really warm your heart. So I'm glad that it did. And I'm going to share it with everyone today to share how incredible it was divine providence that my dad shared the story so I can share it with Cathy because I never heard the story before. But if you Google the story, you can see it on Chabad.org, and it's a Baal Shem Tov story. So the Baal Shem Tov was traveling, which he did a lot with somebody. And this story was passed on through the man that was traveling with the Baal Shem Tov. And a man owned a lot of horses, and the Baal Shem Tov wanted to see his, you know, his collection. And he showed him, and he said, these horses are all amazing, but this one over here is my favorite and best horse. It doesn't look strong, but it's the strongest horse, and it takes such a workload, and it really, really, really helps me. It does a triple workload than the other ones. So the Baal Shem Tov said to him, I think he wanted like maybe to add, like he was talking to him about this horse. And a little bit later, they went into his office, and he said, the Baal Shem Tov said to him, tell me something. Does anyone owe you any money, any debt? And he took out a paper. In those days, they used to write things down like that, not on the computers or on the phone. And he took out a paper and he showed him a debt that this man owed him. And he said, tell me about this man that owes you this debt. And he said, well, this man had passed away um, quite a while ago. So the Baal Shem Tov said to him, would you consider relieving this man of his debt and for the next world, and ripping up the paper and like foregoing this debt from this man that he owes you? So the man thought for a moment, and he said, sure, with a full heart. He said, he doesn't owe me this debt anymore. And he ripped up the paper in front of the Baal Shem Tov. Um, anyways, there was a commotion outside, and they went out, and they said that a horse died. And it turned out that the horse that passed away, that died, turned out to be his best like horse that took up all the workload of this man. And he did triple the workload of all the other horses. And the man was devastated. He's like, this is crazy. So Baal Shem Tov said, sit down, I'm going to tell you something. He said, the worst thing that you can do when you leave this world is not pay your debts. And the first thing they ask you when you go upstairs is, how were you in business? Well, this part I'm adding in, but it's true. They ask you, how are you in business? And this man owed you this debt. So what God said was, okay, you're going to have to pay him back, but you can no longer pay him back in that world because you're no longer in that world. We're going to send you in a form you're going to be the same person, but you're going to be in the form of a horse. And sure enough, he came back into this world in a different way through a horse. And he was his best worker, which made a lot of sense. And the minute he ripped up the debt and he said he forgave him, the horse died, and he was able to rest where he needed to go and rest upstairs. And he was forgiven, and he was able to be in the right place where he needed to be. And the man was blown away, and that was the story. When my dad told me this story, I was like very overwhelmed, and I messaged Cathy, and she told me that this story, in fact, did bring her comfort. And I learned a lot of things about the story. Like I said, it's really important that if you owe people money, even $5, $10, $20, you pay back every cent, every dollar. I'm very fortunate because I'm brought up in a home where sometimes it even gets annoying, where my mom will give me back like 1 cent if she owes it to me. Or if it's $1.10, she'll give me back $1.10. And I'm like, Mom, please just like let it go. I don't want it. And she'll run after me before I leave the house. But it's something to really cherish. And it's, I hope the story will bring all of you comfort that sometimes when, you know, something comes in a different form, there's a reason. And it might not be this reason, but I can tell you your dad was definitely sending you so much love when he passed away. So you had him for how many years? What did you have Diane for? I'm just gonna unmute you.
6.
You had from 6 years. So you had 6 years of this amazing course, and I guess your dad was like basically saying like, you got this now. Like, don't worry, you have this. And you told me your son now wears the quarter and the mezuzah on his neck. Was it the same son, the 6-year-old?
Yeah, it was the one. It was the one that was like it was my oldest son, the one that you had seen the most of.
And one of your sons actually took these films that were made and he put it on YouTube,
Right.
which I'm really grateful I got to watch it. It's fascinating of your dad sharing the entire story in detail, and he had so much more to say.
And we'll
But
share that link as well if
we
anybody wants to
will.
hear
It's
it.
going to be in the description of the class, or if you want it right after the class, I could send it to you right away. It's worth the watch. And I thought this was a really beautiful way to bring in Pesach. Like, your dad had his freedom and he had choices in his life. And he chose to continue to work hard, and he chose to bring up a beautiful family. And he chose to never forgive, but never forget, but to move on. And he chose to keep his family legacy alive. And now you're keeping his legacy alive through you and your children, and very soon your future offsprings that will come into the
Bezrat
world,
Hashem.
Bezrat Hashem, in the right time. And you're going to make weddings, please God. And your dad is going to be dancing from upstairs, and very soon he will come back here with us with the coming of Mashiach, and he's gonna be like, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for having the Chabad house. Thank you for making deals with God. Thank you for continuing to give tzedakah. Thank you for supporting Chabad. Because when you told me you're making a deal with something, and you're like, I want to, you mentioned you really live in your father's footsteps, and it's just really, really, really special. And you should continue making the deals with God, because you are your dad's bloodline, and he's helping you from upstairs. He's pulling the strings. So it's
Does
really
anybody have any questions of anything
so
they'd like to ask?
so that someone said that's deeply moving. Someone asked if he went to America with his brothers.
So they actually went on separate occasions. It was very interesting. It was the most difficult for my father because at the time he was in his mid-20s, and they were only giving visas for to get they were called children. So they were children's visas, and you had to be under like 25 or 21, and my father wasn't, and so it was very, very difficult. So his two brothers came first, but they all were united here, and they all actually changed their name to Leroy, and actually they two of them later changed their name back to Lefkowitz. Like before they died, they wanted to have that name, but they were all Leroys, so they were the Leroy brothers.
So beautiful. And another question for you is, did your father ever feel like he wanted to get like revenge for, like you mentioned that where the house is that he lived, like to try to get it back, because it's really not the government. It really belongs to him, along with most of the houses in Europe that was stolen. So
No, my dad wasn't a vengeful person. There was actually, it's very interesting. One of the people that my father talks about, he was a capo, but he was a Jewish capo, and he took advantage of my father. He took his shoes. He was going to give him extra servings. He didn't get this. He was Jewish, and he ended up moving to Skokie, which is like where my father had originally been, and they ended up being a neighbor to my father's brother. And when he heard that Robert, Otto Lefkowitz was going to be there, he was so petrified that my father was going to, beat him up or do something to him. And my father said, it's, what you've done is now between you and God. God will deal with you. I'm not. So he came a far, from the man who was like filled with so much anger and, I don't know, disbelief. And so we really came full circle, but no, he really was not a vengeful kind of person. He really was more about education. And he did become very spiritual towards the end. He was like very much into that. But education was definitely where he took that passion, and instead of, making it angry, and instead of being very negative and, going after people, he wanted to make it into something positive.
Can you tell us like how he became more spiritual at the end? Like some
So my
examples?
father would, and it was funny because I was just showing the rabbi, my father wrote in all of the prayer books, and I was like, is this desecration? Like that he's writing and highlighting and underlining and circling things and putting sticky notes in it. And then our rabbi had said that actually the Rebbe and the Rebbe before, like they had, when they were in prison, they would like had written on the pages, and they did all sorts of things so that, no, it's not like a common thing, but there are people that, have done that, and there've been very, holy people that have done that. So that was okay. But he became, always reading, Tehillim, like read, the book every day, like would read all of the Tehillim, had special ones, just becoming, wanting to become very learned, studying and tzedakah was always important to him. So, learning and tzedakah, that was like the main focus, and his children, obviously.
And this rabbi was Schusterman, Rabbi Schusterman, I think so, or someone else.
The Chabad rabbi is the current Chabad rabbi that we have now.
What's
So,
their names?
it's the Shem Tov family.
Beautiful.
So, yes.
That's amazing. A little later, I'll tell you a story about the Shemto family where their grandfather saved my grandfather's life in Russia, which is really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So another question. I see Ezra in the background. So I'm just going to say hi to Ezra.
Yeah, I know you can see we're reflecting. Yeah.
We'll send them our love soon. So here's another question that came in. What did he think about re-enlisting and having to return to Germany?
That's why it was so ironic that he went to Germany of all places. Um, he he really, it was a very uncomfortable situation for him, and that's why I think that he had such honor and respect for his captain, sergeant, whatever, Leroy, because he, saw what was going on, and had empathy and sympathy and whatever. But it's interesting. There is a story that there was somebody who was also enlisted, and the person was an ex-Nazi or a current Nazi, whatever. And he was given higher like clearance in the military than my father was. And my father wrote the president at the time, I don't know, it was Eisenhower, Truman, whatever. My father actually wrote him a letter and said, how could the government give that kind of a security clearance to someone who was, a known, murderer, whatever, and to do this, and not to him who, was an honest man. So, he got one of those, I don't know, letters back that was like a generic, thank you so much for reaching out to us, and we appreciate that you're bringing this to our attention, blah, blah, blah. But that was like probably the most shocking thing, but yeah, but obviously being in Germany at the time was not, a fun thing. But my dad didn't grow up in Germany, and the Germans at the time were very much into I don't know, wanting to make amends because the world had then found out what was going on. So I think that they were probably trying extra hard to be good and nice.
I love how they're nice when we fall.
Right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
But listen, we should hear this Pesach. Oh, we just have one more question. Okay, so I actually, did your father ever know of any of the Chabad Rebbes?
Like
Rebbes?
know them in the camps.
No, like basically, has he ever met the Rebbe, which you
Oh
told me
yeah,
earlier?
no, he, greatly admired the Rebbe, but no, I mean the closest, um, like I don't know, and highest level, Chabad rabbi that he was with was, Rabbi Schusterman of blessed memory. He's the one that my father met him when we were getting my husband and I were getting married, because to have the marriage recognized in Israel, it has to be done by certain rabbis and of a certain level. And we wanted to make sure it was a kosher uh, wedding so that it would be acknowledged in Israel, because at that time, I was going to make Aliyah and that's what we were going to do. So we wanted that. So my father then met Rabbi Schusterman and developed this really close relationship with him. He was in charge of B'nai Reuven, which was the synagogue in Chicago. And throughout the years, my father would make deals and different things with him. And then when my youngest was born, they weren't sure, like they're like ultrasounds and different things were saying things about my son, and they weren't sure whether he was going to be okay when he was born. So my father had done like a special, deal with God. I don't know exactly what the deal was. He never like told me exactly what it was going to be, but that if everything would be okay, he was gonna, donate and do something. And then to his bris, Rabbi Schusterman, came out, and we're an hour away from where he was, but he like made sure that he was there at the bris, doing blessings, doing everything. So definitely had, probably the closest relationship with him. But no, he never, went to 770 and had that honor, but talked about him quite often, and I'm sure would have loved to have done that, as would I. But
Wow. Well, you did tell me when I was at the OHL the other day, I asked you if you've ever been to the OHL, and you said yes, you love going there. And you mentioned some things for me to ask on your behalf, and it should all be fulfilled
thank you.
very, very soon. And yeah, so even if you didn't meet the Rebbe, you can still meet him in different ways, just like your dad sends you signs from above. Like he sent you the horse, he sent you the Chabad house on your farm, like all of that. And he keeps sending you little messages, and you're making deals with God. Same too, like especially like a Rebbe, like you can go and connect. And the Rebbe said, if you connect to me, I will connect to you, and through his teachings. And he even said, like after his father-in-law passed away, and that's how we know all this, that like when you learn the teachings of a Rebbe, it's as if you know them and he connects to you. So I really encourage everyone that whoever needs blessings to go to the Ohel, to ask him, to ask on your behalf to Hashem, to God, because he is the closest to God. And because he is, the Rebbe, he's on the top, he has that connection. We all have connections. And in fact, the Rebbe, someone came to the Rebbe and said, I want to go to like a tzaddik's caver. And he said, like he said, you can go to the Chaylim who passed away on Har Zeitzim and ask for a blessing. In fact, he did tell everyone that you can get a blessing from a Holocaust survivor. So I was actually lucky enough to get a blessing from Elie Wiesel when I was working in Chelsea, in a school there, preschool of the arts. And he was there. His grandson was in the school, and I was in the gym area, and I saw him, and I was extremely shy back in the day, but I really like heard what the Rebbe said about getting a blessing from a Holocaust survivor. And I'm like, this is my chance. Just do it. Just do it. And I'm so glad that I did. And it's not what we know, it's who we know. So I went over to him and I'm like, hi. And he was so nice. And I was very nervous. And I said, I'm actually related to Rabbi Lipsker. And I knew he knew Rabbi Lipsker, my uncle from Bell Harbor. And that was like my in. And I said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that you have the power to bless, and I would love for you to bless me. And he took his hands and he blessed me. So it was just very cool. And I remember the other teachers were like, I'm so jealous that we didn't do what you did. So it's pretty wild because Elie Wiesel like was with your dad. So my question for you is, did your dad like keep up with Elie Wiesel? I know he came to your, I know like he wrote you that letter, but besides that, was your dad in touch with him with different projects or?
I mean, they definitely didn't email. I mean, that was that not the generation of email. I think that there might have been letters, maybe phone calls, but that was, that was pretty much how they kept in touch. Back then, everything was done like in written form. I mean, that was the way to communicate, but always had the, utmost respect for him and everything that he did. And they were both very into, Holocaust education without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, we should merit to meet all of our loved ones that were perished in the Holocaust. And very soon with the coming of Mashiach. And it says that when Mashiach comes, that even, when we're named after someone, we ask what happens to their soul, but it says that even, the all the souls are coming back in their body forms. I read that somewhere, which was very cool for me. So you should see all of your loved ones back, the ones that you didn't get to meet, the ones that were taken too young, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, all your dad's family. You should have the merit to meet them very soon, and everyone should meet them very soon. And I want to thank you for doing this. Erev
My,
Pesach, in honor
my
of your dad.
pleasure.
It was
And
such an honor.
anybody,
Oh, and I just want to say that takeaway real fast. Your father, you said he liked to connect at the end of his life, and I would love that we can honor his neshama, his holy soul. If you could take on something, and you said his favorite mitzvahs at the end of his life and throughout his life was really connecting and learning and giving tzedakah. And if there's any mitzvah that stands out that he like practice that you can share, like you said, he wrote all the notes in the prayer books. But let's honor your dad. If you could say his full name again and take on a mitzvah in his honor, and you can tell me what mitzvah you're taking on, and I will send it to Cathy. And we're going to continue the chain of, because when a soul passes away, they can't do mitzvahs down here anymore. But every time you do, they get brownie points upstairs. So let's give him so many brownie points and smiles, and he can continue making deals up there, down here through us, because we're going to be doing the mitzvahs for him. So if there's any mitzvah that stands out that we can honor him with, besides the ones that you shared.
you're asking me like what would be a good
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that anything that has to do with, education would be important, but the things that were, like I said, tzedakah of any kind, even if it's, a couple cents, I mean, that's just, giving to someone else. And I would say also reading, Tehillim.
And what's your father's full name?
So it's Chaim, so life, Ben Tzvi. And it's interesting, my mom was Chaya. So just like you. So it was Chaim and Chaya. So life and life. So
Love that.
Chaim Ben Tzvi Halevi.
May his neshama have the highest aliyah. And
Amen. Amen.
I can't wait for you to introduce me, because I fell in love with him watching his testimonies. He's so cool. So really recommend anyone listening to this. On the description of the class, I'm going to post 4 YouTube links that you can access and watch. It's fascinating. There's so many incredible stories that he shared, and he was so poised. How old was he when he did that interview?
The one for the Steven Spielberg
Yeah.
Foundation, he was in his 70s.
Wow. It's pretty amazing. And Okay, so his neshama should have the highest aliyah, and thank you, Kathy. And
Thank you, everybody. And you can also leave my, email. If someone has a question, they're more than welcome to email me.
definitely, and I just want to remind everyone that Pesach is a time of healing, and the Rebbe said that, it's freedom and healing, so we want to free all the hostages. So if everyone can make sure that people have a Seder, and if people can make sure that they have things that they need for a Seder, if anyone wants to give tzedakah, I sent out a link that you can give for Moas Chitim that I'm personally giving out to people that need. So if you want to be part of it, you can cash at me. And I also want to say that Shmor Matzah, the Rebbe said that that's for healing on the second night. So it's freedom and healing. So everyone that is tuning in, if you don't have Shmor Matzah and you need access to Shmor Matzah, reach out to me. We'll connect you to your local Chabad rabbi. And it's just really, so it's the round matzahs that are very important to eat, and find a Seder near you. There are Seders everywhere, all around the globe. So go, you'll enjoy, and really think about the hostages this year, that they should come home. They should have the ultimate freedom. We're gonna dance, and we're gonna cry together, and we're gonna be so happy to see the ending. There's gonna be a good ending, and we need to focus on the prize and like make deals, as many deals with God as we can to get them out. So let's give them freedom. We're going to end off with a roll call like we do every time, and we do this in memory of Rabbi Kudlarski, who did a roll call every single week, twice a year, by the Kinnos HaShluchim and the Kinnos HaShluchos. So we are going to do that as well. So tonight we have with us Chicago, we have Brooklyn Heights, we have Charlotte, North Carolina, Ottawa, Canada. We have California, Mexico City. And if anyone has any other places that they were tuning into, you can, we also have Pikesville, MD. So it's really special. And Baltimore, New Haven, and I'm sure the list goes on and on. We also have tuned in all around the world, so thank you everyone that tunes in. We love feedback, so please send feedback for the class. We send the feedback to the speakers, and it's very much appreciated. I would like to just end off with Hakaras Tov, which is thank you. I want to say thank you to Hashem and the Rebbe that gives me an opportunity to do this weekly and plants the ideas in my mind who to get, and introduces me to the most incredible humans. So thank you so much. I want to say thank you to all the ambassadors of the class. An ambassador is someone that shares the class. All you have to do is post it on your status or your chats. And in like 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 2 seconds, poof, light goes out into the world. And I share my merits with you. So become an ambassador today. I want to thank everyone that tunes into the classes. I want to thank my dear Mashpia of the class, Shandy Jacobson, for all the behind the scenes work. Thank you so much. I encourage everyone to get a Mashpia. It's awesome for personal life, work life. It's amazing. And I would like to also say thank you to the most important person, my dear husband, who helps put this on the YouTube platform and really supports me with this work, because it takes up a lot of time. So thank you so much to my dear husband. And may we all have a happy and kosher Pesach. We are going to have an incredible story next week. It's going to be a pre-recording, something that I was a little involved with a few years ago. So stay tuned, and I hope you'll enjoy. But really, everyone should just have freedom, inner peace, inner joy, and just only good things in their life. And may we merit to have this year, like we always say in the Haggadah, next year in Jerusalem. It should be this year in Jerusalem, together, dancing with all of our loved ones. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.